Hello, all you beautiful beings, and welcome to the show. I'm Lane Smith Brown, and this is episode number 23 of the Unleash Your Life podcast. And today we're going to have a conversation around what goes in, comes out. Or perhaps more poignantly, I could have called this show Shit In, Shit Out, regardless of which you prefer. This is about choosing where you're placing your attention about yourself and the world around you. By the end of the show, my desire is that you are refocused to the truth as opposed to the lie. This is the Unleash Your Life podcast, where you're going to learn to rewild yourself. I'm your host, Lane Smith Brown, and I'm a best-selling author and rewilding guide. And over the last 20 years, I've been guiding women back to their truest selves. You see, you were born wild with all the wisdom you will ever need to navigate your life in a beautiful and powerful way. Then, just like everyone else on the planet, you got tamed as you fell under the power and influence of others who were also tamed. All that taming you got as a kid has you convinced you are less powerful than you really are. I call all of that unconscious programming power leaks. And on this show, you're going to discover yours, and then you're going to choose to plug them so you can get back to the wild, wise, and powerful being that you are. So grab a coffee, glass of wine, or a favorite friend, or all three, and let's talk about what living your wild self can mean for you. Welcome back. Before I get going here again, I just wanted to mention a meme that I saw this week that is reminiscent of what is happening in my life this morning. It's a guy sitting at a desk and he's trying to podcast, and there is a cat that has been duct taped to the wall in front of him because that cat has obviously interrupted every take that he's tried to do in putting his podcast out. And usually I am able to control my cat Misha, and today I think probably 15 times I've tried to start this show, and she has been insistent that she be part of this experience. So just in case she shows up again, I am just going to go with it because there's just nothing so incredibly dangerous as a cat making a funny sound on your desk. So bear with me here. All right. So that's just my little interjection to start the show. Podcasting with cats. All right, so back to the topic at hand. I've been aware of this what goes in, comes out phenomenon for about 15 years, and it's where I find many of my clues to what the power leaks are in my life that keep me from standing in my authentic power. So to set this up, I've spoken about the energetic force contained within the illusion before. This is where I gave you the metaphor of your life being a bottle of champagne. The rare and exquisite effervescent liquid inside that bottle represents you in all of your brilliance. That's the energetic force part, okay? The cork is all the lies you've learned to believe about yourself and everything around you, since you were a wee little thing until perhaps just a few minutes ago when someone said something to you and it knocked you just a little off center. So the cork is all the misinformation and conditioning you've learned to believe and take in, or it's the habits you keep going back to, even though you know they are not serving you in any way. Simply put, it's whatever you're using to suppress your power. So all those lies are illusions you're living from. Get rid of the illusions and the cork pops and your true self explodes onto the scene. And before you say you don't have any illusions, hold on, I'll show you. You do. Now, the work we're doing here on this podcast and at weirdhummingbirds.com is about recognizing and plugging our power leaks so that each of us can dislodge the cork and allow the truth of who we are to burst out into our lives and into the world. Now, would you agree that the world could use some powerful, strong women standing in their authentic power right about now? I sure do. I love the image of the cork on the champagne bottle, and I love that it gives you all the power to unleash your own life. No one has to do it for you. Scratch that. No one can do this for you. Oh, they might be able to plant a seed, but you have to tend it. So back to the matter at hand. There's this subtle way we keep that cork in the bottle and our power trapped inside. And it's in the language we use, all of the stuff we invite into our lives and into our minds. I've noticed this a fair bit in my observation of people, and maybe some of this is true of you too. So, in my observation, a lot of people play it very safe with their life. They're nervous about taking chances. They're nervous about change. They're skeptical when they are in an unfamiliar, or they hear an unfamiliar perspective, and they may distrust someone who says kind things about them as if it were a ruse of some kind. They're cautious about so many areas where they're taking in information, but then they're completely reckless when it comes to what they put into their minds. There seems to be no discernment, no filter, just acceptance and acquiescence. So if you've been listening and absorbing the previous shows, we're all about taking total responsibility for our thoughts and our actions. We are the gatekeepers to our minds, and we are the only ones who can ensure that the information contained in our subconscious mind is what will move us forward. And we do that by becoming protective about what we listen to, speak about, observe, and take into our receptive minds. Over time, that information will affect, with precision, what we draw into our experience. Now, let me give you some examples. I was raised by parents who instilled in me that I don't get sick. I was taught that my body heals itself and that I am made of hardy stuff that isn't influenced by whatever causes flus, colds, and common ailments. As a result, I could count on one hand how many times I've been genuinely sick in my lifetime. Now, trust me, as a kid, I'm sure I was fake sick a whole bunch of times. But if it meant missing a math test or avoiding gym class, it was warranted. So I have been trained from a very early age not to accept thoughts of sickness into my mind. So if it's flu season, or if everybody in the office has a cold, or even if my mate is sick, I usually navigate that situation without getting any symptoms and certainly no apparent effects. Now, this isn't something I spend any time thinking about any longer. This was training from 50 years ago that got planted well and grew into a knowing that goes deep into my subconscious mind. I have people in my life who were not taught that. They had parents that instilled in them that they were going to get sick if they didn't put on a hat and gloves in the cold. There was an expectation that they were going to pick up whatever was going around at school. Flu season affected everyone, and there was no way they were going to get out of it. So they picked up everything that was going around. At the time, there was absolutely no connection that what they were being taught at home was having an effect on their physical experience. So people raised by worriers tend to be worriers. People raised by control freaks tend to be control freaks. And people raised by people pleasers tend to be people pleasers. Or in some interesting twist, they end up being the exact opposite as a way of breaking free of that conditioning, but usually only as a reaction instead of from wisdom, discernment, or a decision. So neat freaks or control freaks can raise hoarders. People pleasers can raise kids who are incredibly self-absorbed, and worriers can raise kids that just shut down whenever any kind of pressure presents itself. Now, so indulge me here a little. I know those were really, really big, bold statements, and I don't mean to oversimplify this. I'm just trying to show you that there is a tendency towards mirroring exactly what we've absorbed, or do the exact opposite of what we were exposed to in an unconscious attempt to take back control. And if you take some time to look at your life, you may just see it. So the whole point of this show is to get all of us being our true selves, not a reflection or a reaction to what we were exposed to. We're just talking about deliberately becoming conscious of what we're absorbing in our adult lives. So, as we look to the end of the year, I just want to challenge you to become increasingly more aware of what's slipping into your mind that is not a choice. You've just grown accustomed to it. You may think it's completely harmless, and it might be completely harmless if you were conscious of it and made a choice on whether or not you were going to let that energy land and stick. But if stuff is still slipping in without you being aware, then listen up. So back to my story about being raised to not be sick. This is so deeply ingrained in me that it doesn't matter what the experience around me is. It doesn't matter what people say or predict. I know that their words and ideas and energy will not have a negative effect on my health. It doesn't matter what the news says, what statistics say, and what the experts say. Now let me ask you, whether what you believe about love, money, relationships, personal responsibility, the future, health, your purpose in the world, and your sense of value in the world, how much of that was deliberate choice on your part? Got it? How many beliefs about those topics were a choice? Let's take love. What do you believe about love? Is it easy to find or hard to find? Is it difficult to find someone who you can trust with your heart and your deepest desires? Will people always end up disappointing you? Does everyone cheat? If it's too good to be true, is that always a lie? And do you need to guard yourself against it and choose something less than perfect just to be safe, or at least familiar? Now think about the origin of your answer. What came first? Did your expectation create your experience, or did your experience create the belief and expectation? If you look at the message that you got on the topic from your upbringing, your culture, your workplace, your peers, and the media, it will help you decide. In my experience, it is the adopted belief from an outside influence that came first. It is the belief that created the experience. Now let's look at your experience with health. Do you need to get every sickness that goes around the office or in your circle of friends? If you have kids in your life, do you predict that they will get sick when their friends or classmates get sick? When you look at your family history, whether it's be like diabetes or heart condition, cancer, weight issues, circulation issues, bad posture, or problems with your feet, it could be just about anything. Does your family have conversations about how you all assume you're going to develop whatever that family strain happens to be? Do you talk about it, agree about it, worry about it? Now let's talk about money. What's your experience when you compare yourself to your closest friends, your closest relatives, and the people who raised you? Is it pretty much the same? Do you find yourself using the same language around it that you heard growing up? That it's hard to make and it's harder to keep. You need to be lucky to have it. You need to come from wealth in order to have wealth. Or perhaps you were trained that it's more spiritual to not have money, that the desire for money is simply a distraction from a good enough life. All I'm trying to do here is make you a little bit more aware of the predictive language you use towards yourself and your own experience. A new year can be a lovely way to decide to create a new awareness about how you want your year to unfold. And in my experience, my use of language is the predictor. Let me give you two examples from my own life. I grew up having perfect vision. When I was around 30, I had some friends who needed to wear glasses and chose amazing eyewear. They looked fabulous. And I was just a titch envious. in a very, very lighthearted way. So I began predicting for myself that by the time I was 40, I would need to have glasses just so I could wear some fabulous eyewear. But my eyes stayed at 20/20 vision, and there was no sign of decay or deterioration of any kind. I could see things clearly up close, and I could see things that were 400 miles away. And that's only slightly exaggerated. Then I turned 40, and it was like a light switch got thrown, and my eyesight seemed to deteriorate almost overnight. And I've worn glasses for a lot of years now. And although I love wearing fabulous eyewear, I would give that up pretty quickly to have perfect eyesight once again. If you're saying to yourself right now that that is entirely normal for your eyes to deteriorate, that too is because you have learned to believe that we naturally deteriorate as we age. But that actually isn't true. Now, that would be a fun road to go down right now, but I'm going to save that for another show. Suffice it to say, there is mounting evidence from the scientific and medical communities that say our experience when it comes to our health is entirely in our head, 95% of the time. The other place I've been a little nasty with myself is I repeat quite often that I'm not good with remembering names and I easily forget things. What a horrible thing for me to be predicting about myself, but I do it anyways. Here too, there is mounting evidence that you can train your brain to become a memory machine. It is our conditioning and only our conditioning that creates issues with memory, short of a brain injury or developmental issues, of course. We were trained that our minds deteriorate as we age, yet there is no scientific evidence to prove that that idea is true. Our brains can get stronger and better and sharper as we age. That's the truth of it. Now, I don't know if any of you remember Oprah, but a few years ago, she interviewed a guy named Clayton, who was subject to one of the worst cases of child abuse anyone had ever seen. And if you're interested to hear his story, I'm sure if you just put Clayton and Oprah into your search engine, his story will come up. The most amazing thing about his story to me is as he grew into an adult, he became an incredibly caring and gentle being and has made it his personal mission to show kindness to everyone who crosses his path. For some reason, he went through that experience realizing it wasn't personal. He was better than he was being treated. He managed to leave that horrific situation with his heart and sense of worth intact. Now, he may have had reams and reams of counseling since then, and I hope he did. But even in his earliest interviews, when he was still a child, you could see a resilience in him that came from the stories he was telling himself while he was incurring the abuse. For some reason, his stories rang more truthful to him than what his parents were trying to convince him of by their horrible abuse and neglect. Here's another example. The year I was born, there was a lot of babies that were a product of some medication their mothers took called thalidomide. It was meant to help expectant mothers to deal with morning sickness. And it did that. But the side effects for many of the children was that they were born without limbs. Now, there was a fellow who lived about 1,000 miles away from where we were raised that was born without his arms as a result of his mother taking this medication. But instead of focusing on what was missing, his parents treated him like all his other siblings. They loved him just as much as they loved the others, and they expected him to contribute to the house as they expected his siblings to contribute to the house and the family. He had every reason in the world to feel like his life was at a disadvantage. But the language he grew accustomed to in his home was that he could do anything he wanted to do. It just meant he might need to modify how he did it. So using only his feet, he learned to play the drums. Using only his feet, he set the table, took out the garbage, rode a bike, and played with other kids. As an adult, he went to college, got married, had a child, and is now a successful motivational speaker. What do you think the stories are that he tells himself about himself? I had a fabulous teacher in grade 1, and I did really well in her class. But by the second half of the year, she felt I really needed to be in grade 2. You see, I had 3 older siblings, and when I got to grade 1, I just knew stuff because of what I'd been exposed to. So without my consent, I suddenly found myself in grade 2 halfway through the school year. In grade 2, I was behind everyone in the class. And I suspect from my teacher's behavior towards me, she didn't like that I was there. Her other students had been reading books competitively and had check marks beside their names at the front of the class, representing every book they had read that year. The teacher pointed out to everyone that I did not have any check marks beside my name. I was embarrassed and instantly felt stupid. Funny that just one day earlier I had felt smart, and now the tables were turned. I took that new information, the incorrect discovery about myself, all the way to grade 10. For years, when I didn't just automatically know something, I told myself I was stupid. Once I believed I was stupid, there wasn't any compelling reason to try. So I got horrible marks. And then in grade 10, my parents sent me off to boarding school with an administration that took great pride in creating strong students. And all of a sudden, I couldn't get away with any of my antics and dismissal of all things educational. Skipping a 1-hour class resulted in 2 hours of detention, and detention wasn't just goofing off and killing time. It was studying and getting tested. This place expected more of me than I had been expecting of myself. It took about 3 months of railing against it until I succumbed. And you know what happened? I realized I was smart after all. Not for any special gift, but that I had to attend classes, take notes, study, and pass exams. I was always smart, but it was in this situation that I learned to believe it. And no one can take that away from me now. What are the stories you're telling yourself about yourself and your future? What are you predicting about yourself? What are your expectations? What are you predicting for 2021? Is it going to be worse or better than 2020? Is the world going to be better or worse? Is your situation going to be better or worse? Is your relationship going to get better or worse? Is your financial situation going to get better or worse? Is your health going to get better or worse? If we take the time to become aware of our dominant feelings in the course of a day, we may think we're incredibly positive and hopeful, but if somebody was listening to us, or better yet, recording us, they might come to a different conclusion. Most people will say and believe they are super positive, and this doesn't apply to them. That was me many years ago now, and now I know that was my ego, afraid of losing its familiar equals safe zone of comfort. After all, our ego really doesn't like us looking too closely at the rules it set out for us, does it? Now, if that last bit of info is new to you, just go back to the earlier episodes and you'll get the lowdown on all of that. When you get the rules your ego is playing from, it's way easier to win the game and way easier to curate your minds with only helpful and wanted beliefs. So, all I'm trying to do here today is encourage you to just become hyper aware of what you're saying to yourself and what you're allowing to go into your mind. What you're exposed to from people, from media, from memories. Be aware. Even if you only do this experiment for a few days, it will be quite enlightening. So just become a little more aware of the seeds you are planting in your mind. Are you planting fear or resilience, sickness or health? Are you planting resentment or contentment? Are you planting worry or confidence, lack or abundance, grudges or connection, jealousy or admiration? Have you discovered any new power leaks as we've chatted today? Anything you want to let go of? Can you feel the call to embrace your true, authentic power? We're on a mission to let go of everything that is not moving us forward. I would love to know you are swimming in the knowledge that you came with an intention, that you have a gift to give the world, and no one can do that better than you. If you're not feeling that way today, take the challenge and start really listening to the things you're saying to yourself. Listen when you begin a descriptor with I always or I never. Become sensitive to where you dumb yourself down or don't accept your intrinsic beauty. When you hear yourself saying I shouldn't or I can't, may it ring in your ears like an alarm bell that you're about to cut yourself off. On that note, I'm going to leave you with the questions from a bit earlier. Watch your language over the next few days and be aware of the seeds you are planting in your mind. Are you planting fear or resilience? Are you planting resentment or contentment? Are you planting worry or confidence, lack or abundance, grudges or connection, jealousy or admiration, fear or peace? You know my desire for all of you is that you are living in connection, in love, in promise, in resilience, in purpose, and in power. I want you falling in love with yourself over and over and over again, and a little bit more deeply every time. And on that note, that's it for me today. Thanks for being here. I love that you're curious about this work. Will you meet me back here for another conversation next week? I sure hope you do. Ta for now. Well, I hope this show rocked your world a little bit. If you want additional resources, check out the links in the show notes or at lanesmithbrown.com. And before you go, please subscribe to this podcast. It's how we get these tools into the world. And this world needs more wild women standing in their authentic power. Do that for me, will ya? Thank you.